What's up, pizza people? My name is Jesse from Patio Pizza, and today I'm going to show you my modified version of Vito Lacapelli's double ferment Polish pizza dough. In a very recent video, I did a quick version of Vito Lacapelli's double Polish pizza dough, one of the most popular pizza dough recipes on the internet today. I think it's a great recipe. I think Vito is awesome. However, I did think there was some room for improvement in that recipe. So, today, I'm going to show you my modified version of Vito's recipe. Just take a look at this beauty. Honestly, this is some of the best pizza I've probably ever made. I'm super happy with how this turned out, and I hope you enjoy the recipe. Let's get started. So in Vito's original recipe, he starts with a Polish of 300 grams of water, 300 grams of flour, 5 grams of honey, and 5 grams of yeast. He mixes it all up and lets it rest at room temperature for 1 hour and then sticks it in the fridge for a day. There's a few things I'm going to do different here. It's probably where I'm going to make the most changes to this recipe. I think the amount of water and flour is appropriate for this recipe. However, I don't think the honey is necessary. It's going to kick the yeast up too quickly and provide too much easy sugar for them. So I say leave the honey out or reduce it to like 2 grams max. Now for the amount of yeast. 5 grams is a ton of yeast for this little starter. I think the reason Vito put so much yeast in it is because he does cold ferment the Polish in the fridge. But I don't really understand why. Usually a Polish, the whole reason you do it is because you want it to develop as much flavor as you can and just let the yeast go apeshit at a warmer temperature. When the yeast do the bulk of their fermenting at warmer temperatures, they do release a lot of extra esters, which gives the dough that delicious yeasty, sourdoughy kind of flavor. So, for this recipe, we are not going to use the fridge for our Polish. It's going to ferment at room temperature for 24 hours. And because of that, we're going to reduce the yeast to 1/2 gram, or a healthy pinch. Okay, the next day, the Polish is going absolutely crazy as those little yeasties devour the sugar in this flour. Just like in Vito's original recipe, I'll start with a big mixing bowl here, but I'm going to back the water down a bit so that we end up with a 65% hydration dough instead of the 70% Vito uses. So I'll be adding 350 grams of room temperature water to my bowl, followed by all of my Polish. This is a good point to tell you that all of the measurements for this recipe are in the description below. Mix it all up, then I'll add 25 grams of salt. This is a little less than Vito's recipe, which was on the high end for salt at 3%, but that's just a preference and won't really affect the final dough all that much other than it'll be a little less salty. Now I'll add the 700 grams of additional flour. With a large spoon, I'm gonna mix that just until the flour is absorbed and a loose dough is formed. Then I'll cover it and let it rest for 20 minutes before I start to really knead it. This extra rest is going to let the flour hydrate fully and it's going to make it way easier when you go to table knead it. After the 20 minutes, everything is a lot less sticky and way easier to work with. I'll knead it on the table for 5 to 10 minutes and then I'll cover the dough again for 10 more minutes. Following this rest, I'll do another 2 to 3 minutes of kneading. Notice the dough has already really come together and it can pass the window pane test. I'm going to form it into a big ball and then I'll throw that into a greased bowl. Make sure it's tightly sealed and then we'll bulk ferment that in the fridge per Vito's recipe. However, I'm only going to bulk ferment for 8 to 12 hours. Vito's original recipe, he does 24 hours. After that time, I'm going to pull my dough out and portion it up. I'm going to do 260 gram dough balls. Remember the motion for this is a gentle tug apart and then a fold, rotate 45 degrees and repeat until you have a nice tight ball. Then those will go into a greased container with a lid and back into the fridge for another 12 to 24 hours. The reason I'm cutting the bulk fermentation down and doing the balled version in the fridge is because I think it makes it a lot easier to work with the final dough. When it has this extra time to relax in the fridge, it stretches easier. Just think it's a better way to do it. That was one thing I did notice about Vito's recipe is even after 4 hours at room temperature, the balls were still a little hard to stretch open. And this is probably because they just didn't have enough time to relax. The gluten was super strong after we balled them up and it just needed more time. So this cuts that out. 1 to 2 hours before you're ready to make pizza, take your dough balls out and let them warm up to room temperature. Then just stretch, top, and bake the way you'd like. Okay, obviously this turned out great. It looks awesome, smells awesome. It definitely, I can already tell it's gonna have more flavor than the original recipe. I mean, you can see we got a pretty killer crumb structure. All right, let's give it a go. Chewy, but in a good way. This one has been sitting for a second. It's just, It really does have a deeper depth of those yeasty flavors that you want, almost like a sourdough, but not quite there. It was a lot easier to stretch than the original recipe, and I think it was a lot easier to make. It wasn't as sticky. I think 70% hydration is good for certain applications. I don't think it's necessary by any means. I think the end result of this 65% is better, to be honest. I think it's a great recipe. I hope you give it a shot on your next pizza night, and I hope you hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching. Love you lots.